Welcome back to Crime and Prison. Let's take a deep dive into this bizarre and stranger-than-life true crime story that is so unusual and unexpected that it seems unbelievable. The story of a woman who was first in many things except they were for the wrong reasons. Margie Velma Barfield was an American serial killer who was initially convicted of one murder but later confessed to a total of 6. She made history as the first woman in the United States to be executed following the 1976 reinstatement of the death penalty, and the first woman to be executed since 1962. Barfield was also the first woman to be put to death by lethal injection. Velma Barfield was born on October 29, 1932 in San Francisco, North California. She was raised near Fayetteville. Her father was reportedly abusive, and her mother, Lillian Bullard, did not intervene. In an attempt to escape her troubled home life, Velma married Thomas Burke in 1949. The couple had 2 children and appeared to be happy until Barfield underwent a hysterectomy. Hysterectomy is the surgical removal of the uterus and cervix. This led to chronic back pain for Barfield. This painful experience marked the beginning of a significant behavioral change in Barfield, eventually leading to a dependency on prescription drugs. In 1969, Velma Barfield's marriage to Thomas Burke began to deteriorate. Thomas had started drinking heavily, and Barfield's complaints about his behavior led to frequent bitter arguments between them. The situation reached a tragic climax on April 4, 1969, when Thomas passed out drunk at home. Barfield, seeking to escape the tension, left the house with their children. When they returned, they found that the house had been destroyed in a fire, and Thomas was dead. That was how her first marriage ended tragically because her husband died in a mysterious house fire. The fire and Thomas's death were initially deemed accidental. However, in the context of Barfield's later criminal activities, suspicions about the circumstances surrounding his death grew. While there was no immediate evidence to suggest foul play, the fire's timing and her troubled relationship with her husband eventually became part of a broader investigation into her later crimes. This event became one of the early incidents that raised questions about Barfield's actions, particularly when her other victims were later revealed to have died under similarly suspicious circumstances. Throughout the 1970s, Velma Barfield's life took a dark turn as she became dependent on prescription drugs. She struggled with financial difficulties and an addiction to painkillers, which significantly impacted her behavior and decision-making. Desperate to support her addiction and deal with her financial troubles. Less than a year after Velma Barfield remarried, tragedy struck once more. Her second husband, Jennings Barfield, died unexpectedly on March 22, 1971, reportedly from heart complications. His death, initially attributed to natural causes, occurred after a series of health problems that rapidly worsened over a short period. At the time, there was no indication of foul play, and his passing was accepted as a natural event due to his pre-existing health issues. Barfield's life seemed to be compounded with misfortune after misfortune because just 3 years after she lost her second husband her mother suddenly took ill. In 1974, Velma Barfield's mother, Lillian Bullard, began to experience sudden and severe health issues. She showed symptoms of intense diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea. Despite the severity of her condition, she managed to recover fully within a few days, and the cause of her sudden illness remained unexplained. However, later that same year, during the Christmas season, Bullard fell ill once again, displaying the same distressing symptoms she had suffered earlier: severe diarrhea, persistent vomiting, and nausea. This second bout of illness was more aggressive, and Bullard's condition deteriorated rapidly. She was rushed to the hospital, but her symptoms intensified, and she died just a few hours after being admitted on December 30, 1974. In 1975, Velma Barfield faced legal trouble. She was convicted of 7 counts of writing bad checks, a form of financial fraud that involved writing checks without sufficient funds in her bank account to cover them. This offense was likely a result of her ongoing financial struggles and her addiction to prescription drugs, which had strained her finances and contributed to a series of desperate decisions. As a consequence of these convictions, she was sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, due to factors such as good behavior or overcrowding in the prison system, she was released after serving only 3 months of her sentence. This early release allowed Barfield to return to her life, where she would soon resume her more sinister activities. Her conviction for financial fraud highlighted a pattern of deceptive behavior, which would later become evident in her more serious offenses involving murder through poisoning. The conviction for writing bad checks, though relatively minor, was an early warning sign of Barfield's willingness to engage in dishonest and illegal activities to solve her personal problems, setting the stage for her future crimes. In 1976, Velma Barfield took a job as a caregiver for elderly individuals, marking the beginning of a period in which she would gain the trust of her employers while secretly committing crimes. She started working for an elderly couple, Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, in Lumberton, North Carolina, providing in-home care. Her role as a caregiver put her in a position of trust, where she was responsible for their daily well-being and medical needs. In late 1976, Montgomery Edwards's health suddenly began to decline. He developed severe symptoms of nausea, vomiting, and other signs of illness, which were attributed to natural causes given his advanced age. Montgomery died on January 29, 1977, and his death was not initially seen as suspicious. Shortly after Montgomery's death, his widow, Dolly Edwards, began exhibiting symptoms eerily similar to those that Velma Barfield's mother, Lillian Bullard, had shown in 1974, intense diarrhea, persistent vomiting, and nausea. Dolly's condition rapidly deteriorated, leading to her hospitalization. Despite medical intervention, Dolly Edwards passed away on March 1, 1977, just over a month after her husband's death. At the time, Dolly's death was attributed to natural causes, as the symptoms she exhibited could be associated with a range of health issues common in elderly individuals. However, the pattern of symptoms, so similar to those experienced by Barfield's mother, would later be recognized as signs of arsenic poisoning, Velma Barfield's favored method of murder. Dolly Edwards's sudden illness and rapid decline raised no immediate alarms, but her death, along with Montgomery's, fit a pattern of unexplained fatalities among those in Velma Barfield's care. It was only after Barfield's later convictions that Dolly's death was revisited, revealing that the trust Barfield gained as a caregiver allowed her to commit her crimes undetected, exploiting the vulnerability of the elderly she was meant to protect. In 1977, Velma Barfield took on another role as a caregiver, this time working for 76-year-old Record Lee, who needed assistance after breaking her leg. Barfield's job was to help Record with daily activities and provide care while she recovered, which also placed her in close contact with Record's husband, John Henry Lee. Not long after Barfield began working in their home, on June 4, 1977, John Henry Lee suddenly fell seriously ill. He started experiencing intense stomach and chest pains, along with severe vomiting and diarrhea. These symptoms persisted and quickly worsened, leading to his sudden and unexpected death soon after the onset of his illness. John Henry's death, like the others that had occurred under Barfield's care, was initially attributed to natural causes. His symptoms, abdominal pain, nausea, and diarrhea, were consistent with many common illnesses affecting older individuals, and the possibility of poisoning was not immediately considered. Barfield, trusted as a caregiver, was not suspected at the time. However, John Henry's death followed the same disturbing pattern seen in previous cases involving Velma Barfield, a rapid onset of severe gastrointestinal symptoms leading to a sudden death. It was only after Barfield's arrest and confession to multiple poisonings that authorities connected his death, and the deaths of others in her care, to the deliberate use of arsenic. Her position as a caretaker provided her with access to vulnerable individuals, whom she was able to poison with little suspicion, using her caregiving role as a cover for her crimes. As if that wasn't bad enough, Barfield would soon have another case in her hand. Roland Stewart Taylor, another victim of Velma Barfield, was her boyfriend and a relative of one of her previous victims, Dolly Edwards. In 1977, Barfield and Taylor developed a close relationship. However, their relationship became strained as Taylor began to suspect Barfield was struggling with financial issues, particularly as she continued to face problems related to her addiction to prescription drugs. Taylor was aware that Barfield had a history of writing bad checks, which caused tension between them. Their relationship took a deadly turn when she feared that he had discovered her financial deceit. Barfield had been secretly forging checks in Taylor's name to support her addiction to prescription drugs and manage her growing financial difficulties. Concerned that Taylor was becoming suspicious and might confront her about the forgery, Barfield decided to take drastic action to silence him. In February 1978, less than a year after the discovery, Taylor began experiencing sudden and severe symptoms, including intense stomach pain, vomiting, and diarrhea, similar to those experienced by Barfield's previous victims. His condition worsened rapidly, and he was soon admitted to the hospital. Despite medical intervention, Taylor's health deteriorated, and he died shortly afterward. Initially, his death was not viewed with suspicion, as his symptoms were similar to common illnesses affecting middle-aged and elderly men. However, the circumstances raised concerns after Barfield's criminal history began to unfold. An autopsy performed later revealed that Roland Stewart Taylor had been poisoned with arsenic, a fact that was consistent with the pattern observed in other deaths linked to Barfield. The connection between Taylor and Dolly Edwards, another of Barfield's victims, highlighted a chilling detail: Barfield often targeted those close to her, using her intimate relationships to gain trust before carrying out her deadly acts. Taylor's death ultimately played a crucial role in Barfield's arrest, as the pattern of suspicious illnesses and deaths surrounding her became undeniable, leading authorities to re-examine earlier fatalities and connect them to Barfield's deliberate actions. Following Velma Barfield's arrest in 1978, suspicions about her involvement in earlier deaths led to a thorough investigation of those close to her who had died under mysterious circumstances. This scrutiny resulted in the decision to exhume the body of Jennings Barfield, Velma's second husband, who had died in 1971 under what were initially thought to be natural causes related to heart complications. Forensic tests revealed traces of arsenic in Jennings Barfield's remains, indicating that he had likely been poisoned. Despite this damning evidence, Velma Barfield denied responsibility for his murder, maintaining that she had not poisoned him. Although Velma Barfield denied killing Jennings, she did confess to the murders of several other individuals. These included her mother, Lillian Bullard, who died in 1974, and her clients, Dolly Edwards and John Henry Lee. In each case, she admitted to using arsenic to poison them, taking advantage of her trusted roles as a daughter and caregiver. Her motive often stemmed from financial pressures or conflicts related to her drug addiction. Despite her multiple confessions, Velma Barfield was only formally tried and convicted for the murder of Roland Stewart Taylor, her boyfriend, whose poisoning in 1978 provided the strongest and most direct evidence against her. The authorities chose to focus on Taylor's case because the physical evidence was recent and more conclusive. Traces of arsenic were found in his system, and there was a clear motive related to Barfield's fear that he had discovered her financial fraud. The conviction for Taylor's murder led to a death sentence, and given the severity of the punishment, prosecutors did not pursue additional trials for the other murders. The Fire and Burke's death were initially deemed accidental. However, in the context of Barfield's later criminal activities, suspicions about the circumstances surrounding his death grew. While there was no immediate evidence to suggest foul play, the fire's timing and Barfield's troubled relationship with her husband eventually became part of a broader investigation into her later crimes. This event became one of the early incidents that raised questions about Barfield's actions, particularly when her other victims were later revealed to have died under similar to the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of her first husband, Thomas Burke. Jennings's death was later viewed with suspicion after Velma Barfield's criminal behavior came to light. It was only during the investigation into her subsequent murders that Jennings Barfield's death was re-examined, and the possibility of poisoning was considered, aligning with the pattern that would later define her as a serial killer. This second unexpected tragedy added to the chain of suspicious events in Velma Barfield's life, reinforcing concerns that her pattern of relationships was marred by unexplained fatalities. At first, Barfield's mother's death was not immediately considered suspicious and was attributed to natural causes. However, in hindsight, her sudden illnesses and subsequent death became significant as a potential early indication of Velma Barfield's later pattern of poisoning. When Barfield's involvement in multiple poisonings was eventually revealed, her mother, Lillian Bullard's unexplained illness and death were reinvestigated. Autopsies on other victims later confirmed arsenic poisoning, raising suspicions that Barfield may have poisoned her own mother. Bullard's death, which initially appeared to be a tragic but natural occurrence, would eventually be seen as one of the first signs of Barfield's dangerous behavior, highlighting how her choice of poison allowed her to evade detection for several years. It underscored the hidden and insidious nature of her crimes, which often targeted those closest to her and were masked by plausible health-related explanations. Barfield's admission to multiple poisonings cemented her reputation as a serial killer who exploited her caregiving roles and trusted relationships to commit her crimes with lethal precision. Her case attracted national attention, shedding light on the often overlooked risks posed by those who mask harmful intentions behind a veneer of compassion and care. Following her conviction for the murder of Roland Stewart Taylor, Velma Barfield was sentenced to death and imprisoned at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. At the time, the state had no designated facility for women sentenced to death, making Barfield North Carolina's only female death row inmate. Consequently, she was placed in a unit typically reserved for inmates deemed escape risks or those with severe mental illnesses, a placement reflecting her unusual status rather than her behavior. Barfield's unique situation highlighted the lack of appropriate accommodations for women on death row, leading to changes in the state's correctional system. In response, North Carolina established a dedicated death row unit for female inmates at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. This new facility was designed to better meet the specific needs of female prisoners facing death sentences, ensuring that future cases would be handled with greater consideration for gender-specific requirements and security. Barfield's incarceration thus became a catalyst for more humane and appropriate housing for female death row inmates in the state. During her time on death row, Barfield experienced a profound transformation, becoming a devout Christian. She dedicated herself to religion, spending her final years ministering to fellow inmates. Her faith and religious activities garnered attention and praise, including from the well-known evangelist Billy Graham, who commended her efforts to bring spiritual comfort and guidance to other prisoners. Her conversion and involvement in Christian ministry were genuine and extensive, as she took on a significant role in supporting and counseling those around her. Barfield's spiritual journey and her positive impact on the prison community became a focal point for advocates who believed her life should be spared. Supporters argued that her reformed behavior and contributions as a minister in the prison justified a commutation of her death sentence to life imprisonment. They emphasized that Barfield's transformation was an example of redemption, pointing to her efforts to provide comfort and hope to other inmates as evidence of genuine change. Despite these efforts, the campaign for clemency was ultimately unsuccessful, and Barfield remained on death row until her execution. Her case, however, left a lasting impact, raising questions about the nature of punishment, redemption, and the potential for rehabilitation, even for those who had committed heinous crimes. Her story highlighted the tension between justice for her victims and the possibility of personal transformation, a debate that continued to resonate in discussions about capital punishment and the criminal justice system. A significant aspect of Velma Barfield's appeal process involved the testimony of Dorothy Otno Lewis, a professor of psychiatry at New York University School of Medicine and an expert in violent behavior. Dr. Lewis testified that Barfield suffered from dissociative identity disorder, DID, a mental health condition characterized by the presence of two or more distinct identities or personalities. According to Dr. Lewis, she had encountered an alternate personality named Billy during her evaluation of Barfield. Billy reportedly claimed that Velma had been a victim of sexual abuse and that he, not Velma, was responsible for the murders, specifically targeting her alleged abusers. Despite this testimony, the judge remained skeptical, famously stating, "One of them did it." I don't care which one, effectively dismissing the claim that the murders could be attributed to a separate personality within Barfield. This dismissal underscored the court's stance that Barfield, regardless of her mental state, was accountable for her actions. Her appeal was denied in federal court, and Velma Barfield chose not to pursue a further appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, instructing her attorneys to halt any additional efforts. Barfield was executed on November 2, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. Before her execution, she released a final statement expressing regret. "I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who have been supporting me all these 6 years." Her last meal was simple, **** cheese doodles and Coca-Cola. After her execution, she was laid to rest in a small rural cemetery in North Carolina, near her first husband, Thomas Burke. Barfield's case became politically charged when Governor Jim Hunt denied her clemency request. Hunt's decision to proceed with the execution stirred controversy, particularly as it occurred during his campaign for a U.S. Senate seat against incumbent Jesse Helms. Critics questioned whether political motivations influenced Hunt's decision, as capital punishment was a contentious issue that could impact public opinion and voter support. The execution of Velma Barfield, the first woman executed in the United States after the 1976 resumption of capital punishment, sparked debates about the ethics of executing women, the impact of mental illness on criminal behavior, and the politics surrounding capital punishment decisions. We have come to the end of this story. Thank you for staying with me this far. I need your help, please. If you enjoy my hard work, then like and share this video, so YouTube can recommend it to other users. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, then do it quickly. Click on the notification bell icon. See you again in the next video with another true story. Thank you for supporting me with a subscription.